As non-essential workers begin to return to the office, there are a number of questions about what employers can and cannot require, and that includes vaccinations. I spoke today with local employment attorney V. Sotelo to get a closer look at this sensitive and complicated issue. V, first off, let me ask you, as the local economy reopens, can employers require that their non-essential workers return to the office?
Yes, they can. We are at that stage in our pandemic recovery that we are allowed to bring non-essential workers back in the office. If you look on the state of California COVID website, they spell out the tiers that the state has been divided into geographically. Here in Riverside County, we're in the orange tier. So that's the moderate level of infection and hospitalization. And at that moderate level, non-essential businesses are allowed to reopen and bring workers back into the office. If you look on the state website, you always see the proviso for all of the tiers that as much as you can, you should encourage remote work. But that does not mean that the state prohibits it. And in fact, now that we are in the orange tier, the state expressly allows non-essential businesses to start bringing workers back into the office.
And what about vaccinations? Can employer require that their workers get vaccinated? And also, is it okay for them to ask if somebody has been vaccinated?
Yes, yes, and yes. So the federal government, the EEOC, the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, actually published some guidelines and released them to the general public last year that made it clear under federal law and the public agencies interpreting and applying federal law that employers can require their employees to get vaccinated because COVID has been classified as a recognized threat to human life. And when you have a situation in which you have a threat to the health and safety of your workers, employers are allowed to ramp up their efforts to alleviate that threat a little bit more. And one of the things that the EOC has always said, or has said since last year that employers can do, is they can require a COVID vaccination. Now, the California version of the EEOC, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, just last month followed suit and did the same. We were hoping they would do it earlier, but better late than never. The Department of Fair Employment and Housing has expressly said in guidance that it issued last week that employers may require COVID vaccination of their employees. And yes, in order to implement a vaccination protocol or arrangement with your employees, you have to be able to find out if they've been vaccinated. So yes, employers may ask their employees if they've been vaccinated. And if they haven't, they can require, as a condition to continuing employment or beginning employment, that these employees get vaccinated. The only thing I would caution employers to remember is that if employees have a legitimate health reason for not getting the vaccinations or a legitimately held religious belief for not getting a vaccination, then in those instances, employers have to accommodate their needs, because their health needs and their religious needs are constitutionally protected issues. And so you have to accommodate them. But as to those employees that come to the employers and say, I have been reading a lot of things on the internet, I just don't know if these vaccines are safe, the DFEH, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, has specifically said that that excuse is not sufficient to get an employee out of a mandatory workplace COVID vaccination requirement.
I'm sure this is going to open up a whole can of worms, though, in terms of privacy. A lot of people don't want their employers knowing their medical background, and there's concern that this is going to lead to a slippery slope. If I tell them I'm vaccinated for COVID, what else do I have to tell my employer? Are you hearing any thoughts from employers and workers about the issue of privacy, medical privacy?
I am actually, and very astute of you to pick up on that. Most people don't think about that ancillary issue. But yes, I've heard a lot from employers and employees. Employers concerned, just in the way that you described it, they're concerned about whether they have the ability to question whether employees have been vaccinated, or whether their efforts in doing so just opens up the potential that they could get sued for compromising somebody's liability. Here's what it boils down to. The issue is very narrow. It's whether your employee has had a COVID vaccination. So if that's what you need to know in order to enforce a workplace policy that requires COVID vaccinations, then don't ask about anything else. Just ask about that one issue, because that's what the law allows you to do. Just ask if they've had COVID vaccinations. And if they haven't, just tell them you want them to go get a COVID vaccination unless they give you a legitimate health or religious reason for not getting the COVID vaccination.
Obviously, you're an attorney, so I'm curious, do you see potential lawsuits coming down the
Yes.
pipeline from all of this?
Yes, we're seeing lawsuits already. Most of the lawsuits that we're seeing have to do with employees who were laid off as part of the pandemic layoffs that we saw, and who have reason to believe one way or another that their layoffs were not motivated by COVID, and COVID was just used as a pretext for some other reason, some other form of discrimination or retaliation. But mostly what we're seeing is that employees are protesting the way they're treated when they ask for COVID leave or when they ask for paid leave benefits. And what that tells us is that employers and employees might not have done a good job communicating with each other during the pandemic. That's why we were telling everybody from the start, if you're going to furlough employees, give them something in writing. Tell them when you think the furlough is going to end. Tell them when they'll hear from you if you decide the furlough is not going to end, but it's going to be extended. Give them a phone number that they can call at any time of the day and night, and it will get to the right person. Whether it's answered immediately, it will get to the right person. And when you're about to bring employees back in the office, same thing. Make sure everyone is on the same page. Who's expected back when? If your office is not big enough to bring everybody back at the same time, you're going to have to do it in phases. Make sure employees understand what the phases are and what phase they're in. So the bottom line is just good communication. Obviously, make sure your practices are lawful. But what I saw during the pandemic is none of us has ever experienced anything like this. So we're all just learning as we get along. And the government is not unreasonable. It will look, is this something that was not clear in the way we wrote the laws and the regulations? Is this something that was not, our expectations were not clearly communicated to employers? If that's the case, you can probably defend the lawsuit very easily. But if it truly is a case of employers using the pandemic as a pretext to getting rid of unfavorable employees, then you might have an issue.
Well, this is certainly an interesting and complicated topic. V, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Take care.